Welcome to In Perspective, our new series that takes an in-depth look at the prevailing challenges we are facing in our world today. I'm your host, Beth Goldsmith, Chair of the Board of the Associated, and I'm delighted that you'll be joining me today. Over the next months, we will be speaking with local and national experts about the global issues facing our world, from the environment to aging to anti-Semitism. During these intimate conversations, we will look at how the Associated and its network of agencies, thanks to the support of the annual campaign, is getting ahead of the curve to address these issues in innovative and forward-thinking ways. Today, we're going to be talking about aging well in America. According to the US Census Bureau, in less than 15 years, older adults will outnumber children for the first time in US history. What does that mean for our community? And how are we thinking ahead to ensure that we are providing the programs and resources so older adults will live healthy, independent lives as long as possible? And what do we need to do to support the caregivers, who are often family members? Here today to start the conversation is Dr. Leanne Clark-Shirley, Vice President of Programs and Thought Leadership at the American Society on Aging. Following our conversation with Dr. Clark-Shirley, we will hear from three of our agencies, JCS, HANA, and CHAI, about what we are experiencing locally and how the Associated is addressing the growing needs. I want to remind everyone to submit any questions you have for our guests through the Zoom chat. We should have time to address a few questions toward the end of the program. And now I want to turn to Dr. Clark-Shirley. Thank you for being here with us today.
Hi, Beth. Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Well, we're going to dive right in. In the past few decades, how have the issues around being an older adult changed?
Yeah, there's a lot to say about this. And just so everyone knows, I am a gerontologist by training, and that means that I've studied aging in terms of the sociological, psychological, and policy aspects of aging. So my comments really reflect a long time of thinking, learning, and working in this field. So to get started, I just want to talk a little bit about the fact that how we age is really heavily shaped by the experiences that we have across our entire lives and by the environments that we're living and aging in. So what that really boils down to is that over time, as a group, older people actually become the most diverse segment of our population, who have needs and wants and interests that are shaped by literal lifetimes of all sorts of different experiences. In the field of aging, we call this heterogeneity. We say aging is a heterogeneous experience, which really means that how we age and what aging looks like is quite diverse. And I would actually answer your question first by saying fundamentally, this hasn't actually changed at all. This has always been the case when it's come to aging. But I think what has changed, and probably what will continue to change, is the world in which we're aging. So let's think back over the past 30 years. We've continued to make gains in life expectancy. Birth rates have been decreasing over time. So as a result, older adults have become the fastest growing segment of our population, like you just alluded to, which is tremendous. It speaks to tremendous successes in medicine, tremendous successes in longevity, and I think it's something that should be celebrated. But again, reflecting over the past few decades, the world that we've been living in has changed. So think about economic shifts that we've experienced from the 1990s to today, how things look remarkably different. Think about 9/11, that was 20 years ago. For people who entered the job market at that time, who experienced setbacks in getting careers, getting income that has increased over time, people will carry those experiences through to their later lives. Even Obamacare, when you think about it, when Obamacare came on the scene, there were 30, 40, 50-year-olds that had health insurance maybe for the first time in a long time. And their aging experience will be shaped by the fact that they had access to healthcare. Of course, we're living in a moment right now. The pandemic is writing all sorts of implications yet untold. We're in a really critical period of social justice movements, and we're also facing extreme climate change. All of those things will continue to shape how we're able to age in the short term and the long term. So bottom line, I would say there's more of us aging. At the same time, there's more recognition, I think, of our aging society and more avenues to really start embracing this heterogeneity, this diversity in aging, but also more opportunities for ageism to creep up.
Thank you. I actually took notes on that. I really loved hearing that as we age, that we have become the most diverse group in the population. I think that's a really interesting point. So how are we perpetuating old stereotypes, and how should we really be talking and thinking about older adults?
Yeah, despite what I guess those of us working in the field of aging know, that this vast diversity exists, as a society, we really haven't done a good job of embracing it. We haven't done a good job of embracing the diversity inherent in aging. An example, we talk about the elderly as if it's some similar knowable group of other people that we'll never be a part of. And when you think about it, groups talk about the 50 plus, 65 plus. That's lumping 50 plus together is a little bit absurd. People are living to age 90, 100. That'd be like lumping in 5-year-olds with 40-year-olds to think about what people need and want. And we would never do that. So, how do we perpetuate these ideas? How do these show up? I think in our communities, we have a tendency to think about older people as being in need of something, in need of being cared for, rather than as assets to organizations, as employees, as family members, as part of community. I think it shows up in the marketplace too. I wonder how many people on this call today have ever seen an ad for any technology that is targeting older people. The age tech market, it's just flooded with healthcare related and financial related stuff. It's almost like, once tech decides that we're old, we get reduced to our bodies and our wallets, and tech, and I would say other industries as well, typically design for, not with older people. And I think that really results in not only lost market opportunities for, apps and devices beyond just health, but also the functionality. Things don't work well if an able-bodied 22-year-old is designing them, and really, I think what cuts across all of this is ageism. Our internal beliefs about what being old means, what we think older people should be doing, what we think older people need. We tend to have a really paternalistic lens that we think about aging through, assuming that we know best what's best for them. ASA actually just convened a week-long forum exploring ageism, and Ashton Applewhite was one of our speakers. If you haven't, check out Ashton Applewhite. Just Google her. She's got a great TED Talk. She's a noted expert on ageism. She had a great quote. She said something along the lines of, "Everyone who is 70 today has been 20 and 30 and 40, but everyone who is 30 today has not yet been 70. So who really knows best here?" And, when I think about, the second part of your question, what should we be doing instead? Three things really come to mind that I would challenge all of us to think about. First is changing the narrative. This conversation, aging, this is about us. It's about it's about our future selves. You could be 20 today or 89 today. This is about us and our future selves. We have to change that narrative. Second, I think we need to go beyond chronological age rather than thinking about the 65 plus. Think about who in that group you're really trying to serve, who you want to market to, what you're designing for, which problems you're solving, and get more specific than just, a surface level chronological age. And then third, I think we all need to, myself included, we need to take a step back and ask, what do we want the world to look like, when we're older than we are today? If you work with or serve older people in this moment, and I would argue that probably most of us do in some way, think about, the services or the marketing or the products that you provide. Think about if you're older, how do you want to show up for yourself?
Okay, very, very interesting to me in particular, since I feel like I'm part of this whole discussion today. And you mentioned the world. As we look ahead globally, what are services looking like for older adults?
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Well, globally, there are over 1 billion people already who are 60 and older. And surprisingly, this isn't just in wealthy countries, this is in low and middle income countries as well. For the first time in history, you mentioned this earlier, but it's true globally too. There's more people 65 and older than children under age 5. We'll hit that mark, as you pointed out, in just about 12 years. And just like in the US, older adults are the fastest growing segment of our global population. Older people are the fastest growing segment of our population and will continue to have an enormous and growing impact in our economy, in immigration, in all of it. Yet we're so youth oriented. But I did want to share a little bit about the World Health Organization. They have named this decade to be the decade of healthy aging. It's really exciting. And I think they have 4 action areas baked into their decade that really speak well to the global trends that I think we're seeing and will continue to see. The first one is combating ageism, which we were just talking about. The WHO is pushing us to change how we think, how we feel, how we legislate and act towards aging. They're challenging us to build age-friendly environments. That means developing communities in ways that foster the abilities of older people. Delivering person-centered integrated care and primary health services that are responsive to older people, getting past this youth focus and curative focus. And then 4th, providing older people who need it with access to long-term care, which is a problem in the United States as well as many other countries. I want to encourage everyone to visit decadeofhealthyaging.org. There are more resources than I can even begin to talk about there, and a pledge that you can take to be part of the solution, actually.
Sorry, I was writing that down. So you just mentioned this phenomenon, I guess it is, or certainly for the first time in history, that we are a nation of more seniors than young adults. Let's delve a little deeper into the implications of that.
Gosh, there are so many implications. Just thinking about maybe at the national level, how we allocate money to public policies and programs that are really responsive to demographics. It can't be an either or conversation. Generational warfare in this context, I think, gets us nowhere. Some of you might remember the greedy geezer trope from the 90s and early 2000s. But there's a lot of implications for how we're going to prioritize money that goes to schools, money that goes to long-term care, et cetera. And speaking of schools, how do we make our educational system one that isn't just designed exclusively for young people, but one that really works across our lives so that we, this notion that we only go to school when we're young, I think that's already starting to change and will continue to change. And of course, employment, that leads right into employment. Many people want and frankly need to work beyond traditional retirement ages, which are, creeping up themselves. How are we designing benefits, workplace benefits, work schedules that align to our aging society? How are we thinking about retirement in new ways altogether? A question I've been thinking about a lot lately is we're in the middle of this great resignation right now. Are companies, and if so, how are companies viewing older people as solutions to this? People coming out of retirement, people taking on different work schedules. Even environmental design, our built environment, the timing on street crossings. Our bodies do change as we get older in different ways. How do we kind of acknowledge that and overcome this ableism that we have? We've designed our built environment for, younger people with functional bodies. How do we get past that? Grassroots and social justice. How do we call in older people to be part of those efforts? The $1 million question I think about all the time is, how do we make geriatrics as appealing as pediatrics? I mean, if someone has the answer to that, I would love to know it. And, when I think across all of these implications, I would be remiss if I didn't mention the notion of intersectionality. Another thing that we talked about at our forum last week on ageism was that as we're devising solutions and building opportunities for our aging society, we have to take into an account this diversity that we'll be talking about, culture, unique contexts that people are aging in. Ageism, for instance, we know that older women of color are more greatly harmed by ageism in the workplace than others. Families, when we think about families in our aging society, how families are defined and offer support and show up can be very different in the LGBTQ plus communities than in other communities. And that has real implications as we age. We bring a lot of identities with us, of course. So I don't think any part of this conversation can be talked about as a one size fits all.
I'm so glad that was a perfect segue into sort of a definition between the varying needs. How about older adults who are thriving in their golden years versus those who are in need of significant support services?
Yeah, people do have very serious needs. They can have very serious needs as they age. And I know that, what the Associated and the programs that Age Well Baltimore network members are doing, what you're providing, that undoubtedly means the difference between life and death for many people, and offers a real chance for quality of life. But I think, when we think about thriving versus needing services, one thing I think we really need to do is overcome our tendency to silo folks into one of those buckets or the other. If someone is receiving services, maybe care coordination or food subsidies or trauma-informed care, whatever it is, or even needing supports as they're providing care to someone in their families, we can't think of them as just needing services. They may also be thriving in very real ways. So I think we kind of, limit our potential and our impact when we think about people that need services exclusively as being on the receiving end of the equation versus what people can do to continue thriving and to continue giving back. I'm kind of reminded of Baltimore City has a very active chapter of Experience Corps. That's where older volunteers sign up to tutor kids in grade school and help improve reading scores. It's been shown to have just tremendous effects for children and for older volunteers. Undoubtedly, many of those volunteers could be getting services through the Associated. They're getting services. They need supports to live in the communities. But at the same time, they're also playing a huge supportive role in the community and changing the lives of children. So I don't think it's an either or conversation. And I'd actually love to challenge, everyone listening today, think about a person that you're currently serving that you've thought about in terms of, needing your services, and just think about what that person might actually be able to do for your organization or, for your family.
That is such a beautiful wrap up. I'm going to let that be the wrap up just to this segment. I want to thank you so much. And Dr. Shirley will be back with us when we have our Q&A at the end of the thing. But thank you so much. But before we meet our next guest, I want to share with you a conversation I recently had with Deborah, Doris, Joyce, Jean, and Molly at High's Myerberg Center. We sat down to talk about what's important, and here's what they had to say.
So we want to talk a little bit today about what you get from being here, what you get from the community.
I live at Renaissance Gardens, and I've been there for 8 years. We could have more interaction with other senior buildings and more activities, but with COVID, everything just stopped. So it's been kind of an isolation thing.
I also live in the Renaissance Garden Apartments on Pimlico Road. I keep a busy schedule. So whatever the building association comes up with, I'll participate in. Or offer my services if I can.
I'm very active. When I left Roland Park, where I had access to a fitness center, it was clear I needed to continue, and that's where I found the Myerberg. And of course, I use the fitness center. And I love yoga. I hope that yoga gets back into place. Only a mile from where I live, so I can walk here if I want. I've made some friends.
During COVID, it was very, very difficult. It was just the two of us, home alone. But coming to the Myerberg now, since it reopened.
They started duplicate bridge here at the Myerberg, and that is a godsend. We were all so happy to see each other again in person.
You guys are all so inspirational between the bridge and the exercise. What would you make available in the community that would enrich your lives as they are right now?
I think that, especially in the senior place, to give them options and broaden their horizons a little bit, make that population aware of what's out there, because we have a tendency to limit ourselves. Being a senior, I really cherish it. And I'm always open to different and new ideas. I think accessibility would be a great asset.
But it has to be affordable, because when people get to this age, incomes are limited. And pick up on what you're saying about classes, and I'm going to put in a plug for the Myerberg. If you join the Myerberg, you can go online anytime you want to and see all the classes that they offer. Cultural cooking, there's a woman that does Italian cooking if you like that, all types of things like that, and that's really affordable.
I told the realtor I want my starter house over again, and we got less than that actually, but it's perfect for us. It doesn't exist here in this community, and that's what's needed.
What I would like most in terms of our building is to probably have a gym, because there are people who are dealing with certain health issues and everything, and all they do is just sit around. That's why I walk every day.
I'm going to wrap this up because I know all of you are so busy. It's fabulous. It was really wonderful to meet all of you. I wish you nothing but health as you go forward. I'm just going to end with this little quote that some of you heard. I found this in my purse this morning, and it's actually a fortune, as you can see, a fortune cookie, but I just think it's so apropos to today. We must always have old memories, but young hopes. Thank you all for being here today with us.
Well, as you can see, I really enjoyed meeting those wonderful community members. Before we move to our next guests, I just want to give you a quick snapshot of our community. According to our 2020 community study, 19% of our Jewish community is 65 and older. 46% is over 50. Meanwhile, 13% of Jewish households currently serve as primary caregivers for a relative, and that's separate from routine childcare. I'm here now with Lisa Budlow, CEO of Chai, Joan Grayson Cohen, Executive Director of Jewish Community Services, and Lauren Shavitz, Executive Director of Hana. All three have been involved with introducing programs such as Age Well Baltimore, a centennial initiative generously supported by the Irene and Robert Russell and Family and Leonard and Helen Stulman charitable foundations. Let's jump right into it. Watching the video, all of the participants focused on the importance of socialization. Lisa, I'm going to call on you first to please speak to that.
Thank you so much, Beth, and thanks so much for the opportunity to be here. It's a pleasure, and it was a pleasure to watch the video, sort of grinning ear to ear, listening to the impact that we are able to have through our housing communities and our Myerberg Center, among other programs. Socialization is such a key issue. It was really important before the pandemic, if we can remember back then. The pandemic certainly, increased the importance, or maybe just sort of increased our focus on it. The women who live at the Renaissance Gardens, one of Chai's senior housing communities, talked about activities. And during the pandemic, the activities directors that we have working at our properties worked very, very hard to find creative solutions to keeping residents engaged and not feeling so isolated and lonely, though isolation was sort of what was required, especially for older adults in the beginning of the pandemic. And they came up with all kinds of creative activities. And really, what we sort of noticed was, regardless of what the activity was, they dressed up, they dropped off gifts, that kind of thing. It really was about showing that they cared. And what we would hear from the residents is that knowing that somebody cares about them really made all the difference. It didn't matter as much, what the specifics were. And I think, we've learned that going through the pandemic, we've had this balance really of health and mental health. And early in the pandemic, it was all about health and safety. And once we were able to have access to vaccines, and we have vaccine clinics on site, we're able to really kind of shift into that focus on socialization and the sort of mental health part of that balance, which is so key. And I just want to say also, that the center really provides the opportunity not just for classes, but for people to come and make friends, as has been noted by our members, and really establish meaningful relationships. And that's, I think, what makes all the difference in people's lives.
Thank you. What are some of the other areas we need to be thinking about as our community ages, and where are we putting our resources? Joan, I'd like to start with you.
Thank you, Beth, and I appreciate being a part of this conversation, a very important conversation. So during the pandemic, of course, as Lisa had mentioned, there were so many issues that were heightened, and a lot of our resources certainly went to mental health issues and mental wellness, I will call them, issues, in our desire to really support people when they were isolated and lonely, and not really being able to connect with their own families and friends. Additionally, food insecurity was and remains a very large issue for older adults. I think one of the gentlemen in the video really articulated that well, that it's important to think about finances as people do age, and funds are limited. And so we do see people still, unfortunately, making choices between food and their prescriptions. So we are very fortunate in our community to receive so much support through the Associated for individuals, so that they can have the food they need. They don't have to make those kinds of decisions, but that is an issue that still remains. And certainly really that, as Lisa spoke about, the isolation piece will continue for a while. Transportation is always an issue, less so during the pandemic, but that's starting to be on the rise again. And I'll let my colleagues share some other issues that they're seeing as well.
Lisa, did you want to jump in?
Sure, I'd love to jump in. Thank you. So HI, sort of at our heart, we are a housing agency. So of course, I'm going to speak about housing. Such a key issue. Again, one of those issues that has always existed, but really there was a spotlight placed on it during the pandemic as people were sheltering at home. And I think there became a real recognition of the importance of of housing and again, of affordable housing. So HI is very excited to be building a new affordable senior housing building. We're going to be breaking ground next month, and that will add to the 15 properties that we already own and operate. And I would say that because of always limitations on funding and land and just the escalating need, as you guys have mentioned, that there need to be some smaller scale solutions as well. So, focus on community housing programs, home repair programs that really can help seniors to stay in their homes and take care of their homes with trusted sources is really key to stability for folks as they age. Housing counseling as well, counseling around reverse mortgages, the kind of thing that can be enormously helpful to an older adult to really take advantage of probably their biggest asset, but really needs careful and trusted counseling to make sure that it is done in a way that can help the senior retain their home. I think I'll just go back to wellness again for a minute. Just to highlight the importance of focusing on wellness, especially as the cost of medical care really is so high. To just kind of like flip that narrative and think about staying well, and finding those ways that are around connection and meaning making, and around fitness and purpose, and really keep staying healthy, staying fit and living well.
Lauren, and I notice you nodding too. Do you want to jump in here and add to this discussion?
Certainly. I mean, I'll say, and I know we'll probably get to this a little bit later, but one of the things that we noticed early on in the pandemic is that we were actually getting less calls from people experiencing elder abuse. And we knew that people in the community were more reliant upon their abusers to help them obtain their basic human needs, and really disable them from reaching out for help. And also with older adults being so isolated in their homes and not being out in the community, there were less community members available to identify warning signs and reach out to us. And that's really concerning for us. And that's really concerning for us moving forward. We've definitely seen that as we've been able to obtain vaccinations and people feel a little bit more comfortable getting out and about and isolating a little bit less, we're actually starting to see the ramifications of that already. And our numbers have started to skyrocket. So people are really starting to reach out for help as we've anticipated they would.
Thank you. Okay, well, you've heard the word, everyone is listening. We recently introduced Age Well. Can you tell us about it and how it hopefully changes the conversation? Joan, you want to begin?
Yes, thank you, Beth. So Age Well is a collaborative initiative that the Associated has started with the three agencies sitting at this program today, so Jewish Community Services, Chai, and Hana. And what it really is a no wrong door approach to seamless service in our community for older adults, for their families, and for caregivers. And as you may have gleaned already, there are so many services within our system, and it's hard to navigate all of that. So all you really need to do for Age Well is make one phone call where our staff help you navigate the resources that you might need. They may be within our system and they may be outside of our system too. But when we're aging, and I know Dr. Shirley, you've spoken a lot about the ramifications of aging and the whole process of it. We haven't been there before. So for all of us, it's new when we get there, and it's really hard to navigate what we need. It's a new developmental piece for us. It's new resources that we need. So Age Well is really there to help navigate for the caller or for their caregiver what is at each of our agencies. And as we spoke in the last question, Beth, that you asked, is there are a great deal of needs, for all of us during this time, but especially for older adults and caregivers. And I know later we'll have a little bit more of a conversation to talk about some of the needs of caregivers, because Age Well has really impacted our ability to connect with them. And what it's really done for us internally and among our three agencies is our staff have been able to work much more closely together and seamlessly to make sure that all the services that are around all of the agencies that you're hearing from us and beyond just those that are on this call, that we're making sure people are connected so that there's wraparound services for older adults and families through the Age Well initiative.
Lisa, Lauren, do you want to jump in?
Sure, I'm happy to. As Joan was just saying, collaboration is really key. And I think it's key for all of us in the work that we do with older adults. And certainly at HANA, collaboration is really critical for us. And it's how we're able to meet the needs of older adults who are being abused. And having an integrated system that enables us to coordinate services really is what enables us to be able to provide the best protection for victims. And as many of you know, our work with elder abuse is of a crisis nature. And very often resources are needed immediately with very little time to spare. But simultaneously, we need to be thinking strategically and mindfully about what the needs of the individuals are over time. we always have to keep in our minds both of these places, what the immediate needs are, and if the solutions are sustainable long term. And the combination of planning for both the short and the long term is really what's critical and for us to be able to help older adults who are experiencing abuse kind of plan how they want to move towards safety and reduce the barriers that are keeping them in unsafe situations. And so this really well orchestrated system and coordination amongst us is really what's helping giving us a lot of flexibility and the options so that older adults can live with self-determination and dignity and make their own choices about what their journeys will look like. And I'll just also add that for us in the work that we do at HANA, another tremendous benefit of AgeWell is that it's really given us a platform to start bringing heightened awareness of elder abuse throughout the associated system in our community. And service providers of all of our agencies now have the tools to better assess for abuse and identify concerning dynamics earlier. And I'll give you an example or two. If an older adult calls AgeWell because they suddenly cannot pay their rent, and they're looking for financial assistance, perhaps from JCS or new housing alternatives, perhaps from HIE, the person who answers the phone might dig a little deeper and might say, well, why is there a sudden change in your financial circumstances? And might start to question, is this person experiencing some form of financial exploitation in a way they may not have thought of that previously? And another example might be that if a neighbor were to call AgeWell because they've noticed that their neighbor seems malnourished, perhaps seems a bit more isolated than they had previously. And the caller might be calling, looking for caregiving services or seeing what is available out there for their neighbor. But the person receiving the call, based on this enhanced knowledge and skill set, really might start to question if this person is being neglected and might look at the full picture rather than just what the caller is calling for. And so this collaboration, this increased knowledge of the services that we all provide within our community has really helped us make tremendous, strides in prevention and education in the work that we do.
Thank you. We just got a question from the audience, and I know it's something we were going to get to, but I'm going to jump in with that right away. How is the Associated Network addressing long-term care and the health of the family caregiver? Joan, did you want to start with that? I think
You just read my mind.
I think it's up your alley.
It's right at my alley. So long-term care, the way people traditionally think about long-term care is their finances, to buy into long-term care. That's really not, of course, within our purview. But I want to talk about it, long-term care. Also going back to something really important that Dr. Shirley spoke about, which is really thinking about how we are going to age. So at Jewish Community Services, we provide, we're a human service agency. We provide, of course, mental health services, career services, and everything, other supports in between. And I think when I hear long-term care, that's what I think of. We have supports that are there for individuals, whether they have struggled, like all the rest of us, by the way. I really want to put a normative tone to everything that we're speaking of today. You don't have to be neglected, or you don't have to have horrific situations to receive services, certainly from JCS and any of the other agencies, many of the other agencies within our system. I can come to our agency and many others too. So I really want to put a normative spin on this. And so we're looking at people where they are today, and we're looking at them, how we can help keep them healthy long term. And so mental wellness has everything to do with that. And I do want to make the point that every single person, because of COVID, has now experienced some issue related to mental wellness. So we have all experienced what in the past, I think people used to look at other people and say, oh, they have those issues. We know what that's like. So we're supporting our families and our individuals early on with mental wellness. You don't have to have mental illness to come, but mental wellness supports so that you can function and be the best person that you can be, so that you can age, as Dr. Shirley has pointed out, that what you do up front has everything to do with how you will age later on. And so we're looking certainly at those aspects of it. And I want to speak about career, because a lot of people don't think about how that provides you with long-term care for yourself. So many people have had to come back to the workforce. Many people have chosen now to come back to the workforce because they felt so isolated. So again, we provide the career supports well at the beginning of your career, into the middle of your career, and then when you want to come back again. And those are ways also to make you feel like a productive human being in our society and actually be able to support yourself. Volunteer experiences are also something that's really critical to make sure that we are helping people age effectively all the way through that process. And so many of those supports that we don't term quote unquote long-term care are actually really long-term care for all of us. And I think it was such a critical point, as we spoke of earlier. It is important for us to think about how we age and move into that aspect of our life and set ourselves up as best as we can. For caregivers, that is in my opinion, a whole population that we need to give special care to. And during the pandemic, what happened was people were forced to be in their homes with their loved one, or maybe during they might have gone to a day program, or they might have gone, had some come into their home. But people were actually forced into the role of caregiving, and it provided many, many challenges for people. One, they didn't know how to do it. Two, it is exhausting. There was nowhere to leave and get respite for it because of their pandemic. So we provided many, many extra supports to caregivers. We provided them virtually. We taped them so people could look at them at their own leisure when they had a moment when they weren't caregiving. And people really needed that extra support and will continue to need that. And many people, by the way, have had to leave their jobs to become caregivers. So we at Jewish Community Services, we provide special programming in our Career Center now to help those individuals get back into the industry that they may have wanted to, or to switch to a whole different industry so that they can continue to have time to care for their loved one. And by the way, we're talking about older adults, but I'd be remiss if I didn't say caregiving took on a new aspect for folks who are home with children and young adults who maybe needed care, but they were out in programs during prior to COVID. So it's a great question, lots of new supports and continued supports. And I hope everyone walks away understanding that as a population that we really need to provide special care to as we think about older adults and their loved ones.
Thank you. And I'm going to jump back to Lauren for a moment too. Lauren, you were talking about elder abuse, and so much of what Joan has just said applies there as well, since what we read is that most elder abuse is actually by family members that I guess are thrust into this situation. Would you speak a little to that?
Absolutely, Beth. That is very true. Both the research and what we see at our work at HANA is that family members are the primary abusers of community dwelling older adults. In fact, 66% of elder abuse is perpetrated by family members. And I'll break it down a little bit more. 47% is at the hands of children and grandchildren, and 19% by spouses. And I think that these statistics can be quite shocking. I think especially in a community such as ours, in a Jewish community where we have such a strong value for family. And so it's shocking to people, and people want to know why. How is this possible? And I think that the reason is pretty simple. It's all about access, that family members have access to older adults. And it's really easy for abuse to go undetected or fly under the radar when it's perpetrated by a family member. And victims experience so much shame that they are being abused by their family member, and they don't want to get their family members in trouble. But the shame of thinking, this is my child, this is my grandchild, I was responsible for raising this person, and now look, they're abusing me. It's really, really difficult to think about speaking up, reporting, accessing services. And we know that actually for every case of elder abuse that is reported, it is believed that there are 24 cases that are left unreported. As I spoke of previously, throughout the pandemic, older adults have been so vulnerable from a health perspective, and the most vulnerable population from a health perspective. And the same population is the population that has really had to rely upon their abusers for assistance with everything from obtaining groceries to access to telehealth appointments. In so many ways, older adults, the barriers that they already had to seeking assistance were enhanced throughout the pandemic. And the isolation of the pandemic has really given perpetrators even greater access and opportunities to instill fear and cause harm to their victims. But we do believe that as senior centers are reopening, like the Myerberg, and people are getting back out into the community and perhaps isolating a bit less, and it's looking a little bit different, that seniors are out in the community and we are able to really look for these warning signs and try to get help to people earlier. I'd say one of the things that we notice at HANA is that our domestic violence clients call themselves. They seek services themselves. They pick up the phone and call us. Very oftentimes with older adults, it is someone who cares about them, someone that's in the community that notices something, someone in an institution or a organization where they participate that might reach out to us and tell us that they're concerned. And one of our primary efforts over the coming year at HANA is to really make sure that we have a community that really knows how to recognize these warning signs, so that when older adults do get back out into the community in the way that they used to be, we can really try to provide them services.
Thanks, Lauren. Lisa, I want to get back to you. Lauren mentioned it. We're talking also about what kinds of things there are out there for seniors, and you sort of fit into whether it's the reporting, the noticing the signs, or the preventing what's going on by having other options. Speak to us about what's going on out there.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Yeah, I am absolutely thrilled, along with Lauren, that we have been able to bring people back out into the community. There was so much contact and communication that happened sort of over telephone and definitely over Zoom as well over the pandemic. Excuse me, but there's nothing like being with somebody in person. And so the Myerberg Center is now operating hybrids. Over the pandemic, we did create a robust virtual center, which was really wonderful in terms of really keeping people connected and active and engaged. And we did, I will say, when we had Zoom programs, we would open the Zoom line, 10, 15 minutes early so that people could talk to one another beforehand, sort of like if you were going on site to a program and you would chat on your way in the room. So we did do that, and we would leave them open a little bit afterwards. And so there was some interaction that would come out there, but we do have people coming on site now, which is absolutely wonderful. Recapturing the energy and seeing folks and the ability to do it in a safe way is wonderful. At the Weinberg housing communities, we, likewise were, as I mentioned before, just trying to be creative and come up with kind of remote activities, but we have been able to safely reopen now. The housing communities are independent housing, and so it's very different from a situation where you might have a hospital or an assisted living or something where rules are imposed upon the seniors themselves. And, I think Dr. Clark-Shirley talked a lot about the importance of involving seniors in whatever is happening, involving them in the programs and not, sort of speaking for them or at them, but really co-creating with them. And so I think it's it's really critical that we have been able to do that and to engage the seniors in both, what the activities look like and what the atmosphere looks like, and also in the safety measures. So, it's really promoting the importance of having a safe and well environment, and bringing the older adults along with us in really valuing and upholding all of what kept us all safe over time. So really important stuff. And, hopefully we're going to stay in a space where we're able to come together in person and somewhat hybrid. And we know that we've learned so much about the older adults that we work with in terms of their resilience, that we know that if we, take some more twists and turns, we will do it together. We will move through it together, and those connections will help keep us well.
Thanks, Lisa. And I'm going to ask to get Dr. Clark-Shirley back on screen with us all. And I'm going to ask all of you one last question. Fast forward 5 to 10 years. What do you see on the horizon? Dr. Clark-Shirley, I think you need to unmute, and I'll start with you.
Okay. 5 to 10 years, I think we have a lot of momentum going, a lot of voices speaking out against ageism. So in 5 to 10 years, I think and hope that we will see less generational warfare, less use of the word the elderly, and just more recognition and embracing of all of the enormous opportunities we have thanks to our aging society.
Great, everybody. Lauren, you're next on my screen.
Sure. For us and in the work that we do at HANA, I see over the next 5 to 10 years, us really creating a community where we have this awareness that we are not immune from this issue of elder abuse, and creating a culture where older adults feel more at liberty to speak up and reduce the shame, where there's really perhaps where we create a situation where it's not for every one report, there are 24 reports that are unreported, that people feel more enabled to come forward, to talk about, to get the resources they need and work towards safety. And I think that we are really if we do this well and we really create that kind of culture, I think we're going to see our numbers rise in the amount of reports that we have, because we know it's happening. We just have to continue to work to reduce the barriers and increase the knowledge and awareness that people feel like it's a safe place to come forward.
Thanks, Lauren. Joan, a final word.
Thank you, Beth. I see I'm hopeful to see a more resilient group of individuals who have learned technology, who will take their technology growth into the future, which will make them a larger part of our society. And I see a group of people who actually have learned to know what their needs might be, and consequently be able to express those a bit better to ears that are more willing to listen to them.
Thanks, Lisa.
Great, thank you. I'm going to highlight technology as well. I do want to point out that the Myerberg Center's technology hub, which actually did start pre-pandemic, we had a little forethought there, really is all about bridging the gap, because we know that in sort of helping people adapt to technology, it is about building skills and building a sense that they are capable, and that the technology is approachable, because the technology will keep changing. And so we're not going to, the goal isn't to figure out what the next technology is and teach that, but more so to make a situation where people really feel that they can do it, and that it is there for them, and they can be able to make the technology work for them just as it is working for the younger folks as well. And my last word will be about housing again. I mentioned that I think the pandemic, one of the upsides is the spotlight on housing. There is more attention being paid in terms of policy, in terms of housing equity, and certainly in terms of needed resources flowing to both larger and smaller scale housing solutions.
Thank you. I want to thank each of you so much for being here today and sharing your expertise. And I want to thank everyone sitting in on the call, because without your ongoing commitment and support, we couldn't be doing the things we have been doing to keep our community strong. I want to remind you once again about Age Well Baltimore, supported by the Associated and its network of agencies, CHI, HANA, and Jewish Community Service, and modeled after Age Well Pittsburgh. And a shout out to some Pittsburgh people, I think, who joined us today. It provides resources to help older adults stay connected, remain independent, and feel safe. Go to associated.org/agewell to learn more. In the coming months, Age Well Baltimore will screen Fast Forward, a documentary that looks at the aging process. So be on the lookout for that. I also would love for you to share what you've seen today with your friends. I'm sure it was meaningful and that you learned something. And as this video is available, we hope you will encourage those who weren't here live today to take a look and learn more about what's going on in our community. And before you go, I want to wish you all a very happy new year and let you know that In Perspective will be returning in the spring to continue to dive deeply into the issues that are facing our community. And finally, I want to remind everyone about the importance of our annual campaign and how every donation helps. To give, go to associated.org/give or call 410-369-9300. That's 410-369-9300. Thank you all for joining us, and stay well.